So if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I have had lots of gardening struggles over the years, and many of them are very creative. I can find a way to complicate gardening in pretty much every form possible. But one of the struggles that I have had, and I feel like a lot of potentially you as listeners have had as well, is water. Now, we don't live in the desert. We live on the high plains prairie, but it's not a rainforest here. And so water is something I'm always thinking about. And over the years, we have put in different sorts of irrigation and drip systems and things like that. But I'm always looking for ways to water less, to conserve the water we have, to help the soil hold on to moisture, because not only is that more sustainable, but it also can save you time if you're thinking ahead of that instead of being reactionary. So I'm really, really excited to be joined by an expert in this very topic today. Noelle Johnson is a horticulturist, a landscape consultant, and a garden writer who lives in Phoenix, Arizona. So much more dry than me and probably a lot of you. So I know she knows what she's talking about in this realm. She is also known as the Arizona Plant Lady, and her passion is to inspire and teach people to create, grow, and maintain beautiful gardens that thrive in a hot and dry climate. She also has some really awesome books out, her blog is Desert Gardening 101, and then she has Dry Climate Gardening, and then I think the Water Smart Garden just came out, so we're going to talk about that today as well. But she has a lot of practical strategies. I'm excited to dive into those today, so welcome, Noelle.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
Yes, I think we have a lot to talk about, to commiserate on. So I guess just to start us off, if someone's listening to this, let's say they live in a place that isn't super dry. Maybe they're, somewhere where there's more rainforesty, a lot more moisture. Is it worthwhile for them to pay attention to this information? Should they skip to a different episode? Is this just for people like you and I, or is there other applications here?
You would be really surprised. So this book was put together to address people no matter where they live, because there are water crises going on in many parts of the country, and even in places that you would be surprised. I do a lot of travel as part of my job in all parts of the country, and my daughter lives in northern Michigan, so I spend a lot of time up there as well. And I spent 9 days in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2023 in the summer. And they were at the end of a 3-year drought. And I was amazed at all the water collection strategies and all the things that they were doing in Minneapolis. And what people don't realize is, yes, we can have issues when we don't get average rainfall amounts. And that's happening more often because with a warming climate, it affects the rain. So overall, in general, we're getting less rainfall. And what also is happening is throughout the country, people are using more water than is being replenished. And that's a big deal. So groundwater supplies are being pumped up to meet demand, and they're not being replaced as quickly. So there's areas in some parts of the country that are even sinking because of that groundwater being taken out. And an interesting statistic, which usually blows people away, is that only 3% of the whole world's water is fresh water. So that means water for us to use to irrigate everything. But of that water, only less than 1% is available to us, because that other 2% is frozen. It's frozen in glaciers and things like that. And so we have precious little to work with.
So even if you are in an area has more moisture, we all need to be thinking about just not being wasteful with it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I like that angle for sure. So if you're listening and you live in a wet place, just keep listening. You're going to need this just as much as I do here in Wyoming. Okay. So I love the title of your book, Water Smart Garden. I guess I have lots of questions that get into the more of the nitty gritty, but just start us off overarching, like where does someone start thinking, if they're going to start thinking towards creating a water smart garden? Let's say they already have a garden in place. How can they start making that transition?
Yes. And it could be a lot easier than you think. So your household water use, 30 to 70% of that household water use goes to water your garden or goes to the outdoors.
Ooh.
And maybe if you live in an area that gets plenty of rainfall, chances are you still may find yourself out there on a hot summer's day having to water your plants. And anytime that we are providing supplemental water to our plants, it's a time to give a pause and think, okay, is there something I can do so that I don't have to water it as often? Maybe it will be happier with rainfall. And excuse me. So that's the best place to start. And there's some really, really easy steps that we could first take. Number one, I want you to identify your thirstiest plants, the ones you're always having to go out and give extra water to. That's a great place to start and consider, okay, maybe I should replace those. Maybe I should replace those with something that is a little more drought tolerant. And before I go further, there's a lot of misinformation, because when you call a plant drought tolerant, you think, well, that means I don't have to water it, that it's tolerant to drought.
Yeah.
And that's really not what it means at all. It's better to call it more of a low water use plant, because all plants need water.
Sure.
And yeah. So, but there are plants that are lower water use that are beautiful, and you would never know they were low water use. And so first of all, think about switching out those thirsty plants and putting in some drought tolerant options. When it comes to trying to figure out, okay, well, what plants are drought tolerant where I live? You have some resources you can consult. First is, if you have a botanical garden nearby, go visit. Botanical gardens are beautiful places, and most will have a drought tolerant or a native plant area. So native plants are a great place to start in looking at what type of plants to add, because native plants are used to the amount of average rainfall that you get. You could also, though, look at plants that come from regions with similar climate as yours. And so you can broaden your plant palette. Your local nursery will also have information for you, where you could talk to your local nursery professional and say, you know what, I'm trying to save some water. I'd like to add some plants that I'm not going to have to go out there and water myself. And so that's the number one option for you, is switch out the thirsty stuff and add new things. Second is, let's say you have a garden already and your plants are fine, but you still find yourself going out there and watering them with a hose in the middle of summer. Let your plants grow to their natural size. And I'm specifically talking about shrubs and ground covers. We have a culture where we love to baby our plants. We give them more than they need. We prune them more than they need. We give them more water and fertilizer than they need in general. And so by allowing our plants to grow to their natural size, first of all, that shades the root zone, and it prevents the soil from drying out too quickly underneath the plant. So prune less, allow plants to grow to their natural size. Pruning actually increases the water use of a plant. So if you like more of a formal garden where you have more of the formal shapes of shrubs, every time you prune those shrubs, they have to use more water than a plant that hasn't been recently pruned, because they're trying to regrow back their growth.
That makes sense.
Two really easy ways to get started. There's more, but
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I like the native plant idea. I just know in the little bit I've dabbled with that here, it's such a huge difference. Especially like the berries, like the more native berry plants versus if I try to do raspberries or blueberries or whatever. It's night and day. Like the other ones I can ignore, almost abuse them, like water them if I feel like it, or just let them be rain watered and they just grow happy. They're so happy. And I'm like, I just appreciate you so much for not needing me to babysit you. Yeah.
You know, and if you like some thirstier plants, if those are some of your favorites, well, reduce the number, and just have a little area where you have some of those plants. And then, in the other parts of your outdoor space, well, let's plant more natives or more things that are really well adapted.
Yes, that's a good suggestion. How about vegetables? Because I know most of my listeners our gardens are probably primarily vegetable. We're looking at food production. How can we help our vegetable gardens be more drought tolerant?
Okay. Well, there's a lot of good news here because I like growing vegetables too.
Good.
Now, let's say you're getting started. If you're considering growing vegetables, the best location to grow vegetables is an area that gets a little bit of afternoon shade. Because late afternoon is when the sun is at its most extreme and it's hottest. And the higher the temperature and the more sun, that makes plants lose more water. So if you're looking for a place to put it, an area that gets a little bit of afternoon shade is a great idea. We don't want to plant them close to trees or shrubs because those plants are going to take advantage of the available water source in that nice, beautiful, rich soil. So we want to plant those, a ways from there. Also, if you're considering whether to have a raised bed, where your vegetables are being grown in a bed that's on the ground but above versus in ground, a garden that's planted in the ground will use less water.
Yes.
Than one that's in a raised bed. Because the raised bed is, placed out of the soil, so it dries out faster. Yep. So those are things that we can consider. If raised beds are really the only way you can do it, then don't have a tall raised bed. Because the taller the raised bed goes, the more that's exposed to the air and the faster it dries out. So if you want to go with a raised bed that's not very tall on the sides. Yes. If, and a really big thing, Jill, is vertical gardens. Yes. Yeah, and really with vegetable gardens. Yeah. And they are a water waster in dry climates. You are constantly having to water them because they're open to the air on all sides. And there's very little space for the roots to grow. And so they dry out so fast. So while they're pretty and it's kind of a nice conversation piece, it's a water waster. So I don't recommend those whatsoever. Now, here's a fun one. We all love to get the most we can out of our vegetable gardens. And the way we do it, usually we don't plant enough vegetables in the space that we have available. We could usually fit more in there.
Now you're speaking my language. I like packing mine in. I'm like, I'm breaking all the rules, but we're just going dense.
Pack it in. And so to do that, we want to stagger. So if you have a row and a row, you want to go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And what that does is you do it with the notion that as the plant grows, that the leaves of the plant is going to shade the soil.
Yes.
So you can't see any soil in between as your plant's kind of full grown, as your vegetables full grown. That keeps the soil, any protection we can give the soil from the sun is going to help prevent it from drying out. We can also mulch our vegetable gardens. That's really important. Straw works really well. And you can kind of place that in between the vegetables as they are growing. You can't put it on till the seeds come up, but then you can start to put the straw around there, which really helps as well. So those are things you can initiate right away. When it comes to watering your vegetable gardens, using your hose is a very inefficient way to water your vegetables.
Yes.
And it leaves you tied to your vegetable garden. If you want to go away for a few days in the summer, and there's no one to water your vegetables, they're going to dry out and be very sad. Or even if you have someone, a house sitter that you think you can rely on, I've heard countless stories.
Yes. Yes. I've experienced it. It's stressful.
Don't rely on someone else.
No.
And so it's really helpful to install an irrigation system in your vegetable garden, and it's just set the timer and you're fine. So drip irrigation works best for that.
Okay.
You could also there's also little soaker hoses that you can do in there as well. And you can attach the soaker hose to your hose, your little hose faucet, your hose bib on outside of your house. You could put a timer on there. Very inexpensive. You can get all this stuff at your big box store and have it on a timer, and it's going to release that water and take care of it for you. Drip irrigation, and this is for the vegetable garden and everywhere else, is the absolutely most efficient way you can irrigate. Because if you use sprinklers,
yes,
the sprinklers, a lot of that water is immediately evaporates before it even hits the plants.
Yep.
Sprinklers aren't good for vegetable gardens. And your vegetables, especially if you live in a climate that is more temperate, that has more humidity, you're going to have an increase in fungal diseases if you have wet foliage all the time. So drip irrigation slowly drips water at the root zone of the plant. And it's the most efficient way to do it. There's also vegetables that are a little more lower water use than others that you can consider. So those are things like asparagus, pole beans, snap beans, Swiss chard, eggplant, melons, peppers. Those are my favorite. Squash and tomatoes. So we can look at those kinds of things to grow as well. And there's also always a discussion, if you've been into vegetable gardening, do you plant heirlooms or do you try? It could be a contentious topic.
It can be very contentious. Yes.
Or do you plant more of the newer hybrids? If you want to save water, what you can do is look for heirloom varieties that originate from lower water regions.
Ooh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And they are constantly working on creating new hybrids that use less water. So if you're looking at, if you're opening up your Burpee catalog, which is or any seed catalog for vegetables, you're going to start to see things like drought tolerant or lower water use or water wise. You can look for those types. So what they're doing is, with the increasing water crisis, they are working on creating hybridizing varieties that use less water.
I didn't think of that. I like that idea. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Hey, friends. So I'm interrupting this episode for just a second to talk about something that I actually used to be really embarrassed about. So much so that I never talked about it publicly. And that is the fact that every summer, I would basically completely fall out of love with cooking. So much so that I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I was thinking that I was the only one who felt like that until recently, when I started to share my deep, dark secret online. And I found out that many, many of you feel the same way. I think it's just because we have so much going on in the summers that it's just really hard to find that motivation to get in the kitchen and put food on the table. The problem is, our people, they still want to eat, unfortunately. So we still have to find ways to nourish them and ourselves in a cost-effective and healthy way. So I've been wrestling with this problem in my own life and, for those of you, for many years now, trying different things, experimenting with different ideas. And I finally have created something that I think may just help. I know it has helped me. It's called Mealcraft, and it's not your typical meal planning system. Rather, it's a set of customizable frameworks that are endlessly flexible based on what you have in your gardens, your pantries, your freezers, your larders. You don't have to go to the grocery store to do specific shopping trips or anything like that. We're just using what you have, which really is what homesteading is all about. So Mealcraft gives you 4 new frameworks each month. And I'm personally having so much fun with these because they can be different every time, saves me a lot of money. It's reducing the leftovers and the waste that's coming out of my kitchen, and it just makes it a lot more enjoyable. So if you'd like to join us over in Mealcraft, over 600 of you have already joined the fun. You can visit the link in the show notes to learn more. Now, back to our episode. So I'm curious, I know you're in Arizona, which is way more dry than me. What does your vegetable garden look like? Do you have certain varieties or plants, species that you really focus in on that you can make work in Arizona?
So Arizona, most people are shocked to hear this, but Arizona supplies the whole nation's lettuce supply, 80% of it during the wintertime.
Oh.
Yes, we're a very big agricultural region. And people are so shocked. So people say, I can't grow. I said, yes, you could grow vegetables here. You can. And we could grow everything here, except for rhubarb. We can't grow rhubarb.
Really?
Rhubarb cannot be grown here. which is okay because I don't really like
You don't
it.
even like it. Is it because it needs the cold snaps?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So rhubarb does not really work in the warmer regions of our state. I am originally from California. And so growing up, we would drive past all the fields and the fresh farm stands and, farming's in my blood. But my garden, I don't like fussy plants. So
Same.
I love things, especially in the summer. I mean, corn is fun to grow. I enjoy growing peppers of all kinds because they could tolerate everything. We could grow herbs like crazy. We grow the best basil anywhere. It just loves the sun and the heat. I also love growing cucumbers and I love beans. And in the wintertime, we could have vegetables growing 12 months out of the year. So that's something really nice. So I love my leafy greens. I love my leaf lettuces. I do love Swiss chard. I do have issues with carrots. I have the hardest time growing long carrots. Mine are always a little stubby, but that's a small price to pay. I can, radishes and garlic, love to grow garlic. So it's fun. And I do have microtubing.
Okay.
Drip irrigation.
What your irrigation setup looks like.
Yeah. So drip irrigation, microtubing. So it's I think it's about 1/4 of an inch diameter, and it has little tiny holes pre-pierced through it. And you weave that among your vegetables, and they have little stakes you could put in to kind of hold it in place. I have mine connected to an in-ground irrigation system because I'm in Arizona. I have drip irrigation for all different kinds of plants. So it was easy to put that in there. But early on, when I was first growing vegetables, I would have my little battery-operated timer that I just screwed onto my little hose faucet. And what it does is it turns on and it turns off the water flow.
Yep.
And I would connect my little microtubing drip irrigation system to that, which made it really easy.
Now, I'm sure it depends on the time of year and everything, but do you, in general, have it water once a day, every day? Are you having multiple intervals throughout the day?
No, it actually depends on the season. And this is a big mistake people make, not just with their vegetable gardens, but everything else, is watering frequency has to change seasonally.
Sure.
Plants use the most water, the hotter it is, and the drier it is. So if you have a windy day, they're going to want water. And if you live in an area that has lower humidity, they're going to dry out faster than one that does not. And so in the summer, you're going to have to water the most frequently. In the winter, if you can grow vegetables in the winter, you're not going to have to water them as often, and fall and spring kind of fall in between. So how you determine how often to water is you're going to do a little test, and trust me, it's an easy test. You're going to use your finger, and you're going to take your index finger and you're going to insert it in the soil about 2 inches, about where your knuckle is here, and pull it back out and then just kind of rub it between your thumb. If it's barely moist, your plants need more water. Now, you do not have to do this every single time.
Sure.
But as the seasons change, it's a good method to see as, okay, all right, I think I tested it today. It felt pretty moist, so I didn't water. Okay, but the next day, it was pretty dry. It's going to help you determine an average of how often they need to be watered. So in the summer, it could be every day. It could be, if you live in it, it could be every 4 or 5 days. So my daughter in northern Michigan, she waters her vegetable garden usually once every 4 or 5 days in the absence of rain.
Okay.
Yeah. I know, wouldn't that be nice?
That would be really nice.
Yeah. Where I live in the hot desert, I have to go once a day in the summer.
Okay.
Every day.
Yeah.
In the winter, I'm probably going every 3 or 4 days here because we have mild winters.
Sure.
And then in the spring or fall, that's kind of a helpful time really to do the finger test and see how often you need to go. And it's also helpful when you have unexpected weather extremes. We've had hotter summers everywhere, not just I mean, everywhere. People are having hotter summers and plants are stressing. And when I've been traveling around the country, I have seen it kind of, I mean, I don't wish that on everybody, but it makes me feel not alone because we're having hotter summers. But so is everybody else. So I kind of feel like, okay, we're all sharing in this hardship. So what can we do?
Solidarity. Yes.
That's it. Solidarity.
Yeah.
So if you have a very warm fall, you may need to continue your watering more on a summer schedule, so just kind of keep those things in mind because weather has become more and more unpredictable. It's not behaving like it used to. Yeah. And so, we just want to kind of be aware of those types of things.
That makes sense. Yes, for sure. Do you ever use shade cloth? I know you talk about planting. Yeah, because I'd love you to speak to that.
So normally, if you live in a region that has very intense sun, especially if you're growing things like tomatoes, your vegetables will appreciate some shade. Yeah. And so shade cloth is a wonderful way to do that. You can get 50% shade cloth, which shade cloth is a plastic material, and it just has tons of tiny little holes in it. And a 50% shade cloth screens out 50% of the sun's rays, and it lets 50% through. So if you have a vegetable garden, it's helpful to have some little supports that you can mount the shade cloth on. And so now this is going to be more specific and individual according to your region. Where I live, we plant tomatoes in early March.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I know. People might be a little jealous.
I'm a little jealous. Okay.
Yeah. We can plant them.
We can still be friends. It's fine.
Okay. But by the time late May hits, it's getting really hot, like 90s and 100s, and the tomatoes aren't that happy. So then we know, okay, we bring out the shade cloth, we keep it out there, and then we remove it usually when the temperatures start to dip into more reasonable ranges, like 90 or 80 or something like that. Keep an eye on your on them. If they're starting to look sun stressful, then put your shade cloth on. But once you put that shade cloth on, don't take it off a week later.
Because then they'll shock them, I would imagine.
They'll shock them. You just got to keep that on for the long term. Now, when it comes to new plants, like we're talking non-vegetables at this point, when you add a new plant, it's this precious little baby, leafy baby. And the way plants are healthy and handle water comes with age. So they have to have a decent root system, a nice sized root system to absorb the water that they need. And that little tiny plant baby has been grown in a little nursery container. It does not have that many roots. So when it's first planted, its ability to take water up is very limited because it's going to take several months for those roots to grow.
Yep.
So what we can do to help them, especially if you are having a hotter than normal summer, you could put shade cloth on them, just directly on the plant. You could just lay it directly on there. And that shade cloth will filter out the worst of the sun's rays, about 50%, which will help lower the amount of water that leaves through a plant's leaves. So plants lose their water through the top of their leaves, whether they want to or not. The sun's just going to suck it up. And so shade cloth, so if you live in a very dry region, shade cloth can really be a dry, sunny region. That could really be your best friend in the summertime. To put that on your plants when temperatures get, 80s, 90s, and then leave it on until the temperatures start to come back down, usually, later summer. And then you can take it off. You don't have to do it every summer. It's just when they're babies. And we want to help them get a good start because as the plant grows, the roots grow, but also the upper part grows. So you have more foliage and it shades itself and it just becomes more robust and strong. And so those are ways that, that the shade cloth can really be helpful. Also, the time of year we add new plants is a big deal. Mm-hmm. So fall is the best time to add new plants, no matter where you live, because we want to do it well in advance of freezing temperatures, well in advance of the soil freezing.
Okay.
Okay. Soil doesn't freeze here, but I know it freezes in lots of other places.
Yes, it does. It certainly does. Yeah. And when you say add new plants, you're speaking to like landscaping, like tree shrubs,
landscaping plants. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Yep.
So by adding them in the fall, that allows them time to get growing before the winter hits. Okay. So the roots start to grow.
Yeah.
You're not going to see much above ground growth, but those roots are starting to grow. And then as in a colder region, as the ground thaws, those roots start growing again. And then by the time summer hits, that plant's had several months to start growing roots. So it's better able to withstand the stresses that summer brings along and the water stress that comes along. So a plant that you add to your garden in the fall is going to need less water than when you plant in spring.
Makes sense. Okay. So I have wondered that because I've heard for us, if I'm going to put in a new tree, do it in the fall. Our falls are tricky because we'll go from, August, September is 90, sometimes 100. But then sometimes middle of September, we'll have a snowstorm. So I'm always like, what is fall? I don't even know.
But the ground doesn't freeze during the first snowfall.
No, it doesn't. So would it be okay? Let's say I take a gamble. I put a new baby tree in September 1st. We get a snowstorm in 2 weeks. But is that still okay? Because it doesn't stay cold, right? It'll be fine. Okay. So that's all right. All right.
As long as the tree is adapted for your climate, it's fine.
Which I have learned that lesson the hard way. And now I buy native trees because,
And I will mention this, talking about appropriate plants. So as much as I love them for their convenience, and I'm not going to name out a specific company, store, but big box stores.
Yes.
They have garden centers attached to them. And you walk into them and they have all this eye candy at the front, all these pretty flowering things. The thing is, oftentimes, not all the plants they sell are appropriate for your climate.
Yes. Yes.
And it's actually a big pet peeve of mine. Like, why are you selling? So people will see this beautiful plant and they're like, oh, that'll look great in my garden. They plant it. And a few months later, the plant's dead and they think it's their fault. Yep. And it's not their fault at all. Now, I will tell you a story. When I was shopping with my daughter at a very well-known big box store in Michigan, and they had moved into a new house and they were adding new plants. So she brought me along, and in front of the garden center, because they always put all the plants out front for you to see, there was this beautiful shrub. Now, this is a shrub I am very familiar with because it grows throughout the Southwest, the desert Southwest. Beautiful purple flowering shrub. They were selling this shrub in northern Michigan. Now, this is in a climate that gets down to minus 20 in the winter.
Yes.
This shrub can only get down to plus 10 degrees and it will die.
It's not
and they were
like that.
selling it. So big box stores are it's probably the cheapest place to go and buy a plant. But do not assume that just because you see it there that it will grow. Do a little research before you grab that eye candy plant to make sure they'll grow in your area.
Such good advice. And I've noticed, because we're zone 5 and all the plants, the shrubs and stuff at the big box stores, they say zone 5. And I was fooled by that for so many years. But I've learned that big box zone 5 is not our zone 5. It's just different, like you said.
It's not. Yeah. And it's hard because the garden centers, they're managed at the corporate level. Yeah. And it's not, there's no localized, and I don't know. I mean, but I doubt that there's some localized input, I guess, but they're still selling things that have no business growing. Yeah. So just buyer beware when you go in there. Yep. And what's nice is you have your phone wherever you go. If you're in there and you're tempted, type in the name of the plant in your browser, then put where you live or the biggest city near where you live. Yep. Okay. And maybe the name of your state. And you should get specific information about that plant in your state. If nothing comes up, that's a good sign that does not belong here.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the best luck when I finally figured that out. It took me a long time because I thought it was my fault. I'm like, I'm killing all these little perennials and I don't know why. And then I figured it out. But then they went out of business, which makes me so sad. But it was a native plant nursery. And everything I bought from them like 5 years ago, it's still alive because it was very specific to our microclimate. So it's easy to think you're saving money by going with those, but like you said, you end up wasting money in the long run because they just don't thrive. You waste so much money.
And people will say, well, they have they have a guarantee. You have to bring in the dead plant, your receipt will give you money, but you have lost time and you've experienced frustration. That's not worth it. No. It's really not. Now, if you're fortunate, and I know not everyone does, but if you live near a larger city, a lot of the botanical gardens will have plant sales periodically.
Yes.
That is the number one best place you can go to get a plant.
Yeah.
You do not need to question whether it's going to grow in your area. They have experts there to answer your questions. And so if you are fortunate enough to live near one, I highly recommend you go. And if you have one that's a few hours away, well, make a trip out of it. Right. Go spend a weekend and, do that.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. When I was looking at your book, one aspect that really stuck out to me that I am not familiar with at all is the Oyas. I think I'm saying that right.
Okay, it's called Oya, so it's a Spanish word, but it's spelled Olla. So you would say everyone pronounces it that way, but they're called Oyas.
Sure. Okay,
and they are the coolest things. I'm so excited you mentioned that. So Oyas are, if you think of a terracotta plant, a pot, a container. Well, they're made out of clay, like terracotta, and you got this skinny top, and then you got this big bowl here. And they are an ancient irrigation tool that we use today, and they're really gaining in popularity. And these clay vessels are buried in the ground next to plants, and they have a removable top. So you remove the top, you fill up your Oya with water, and that water slowly seeps out the sides over several days. As the water dries out, it pulls water from the Oya. And that's kind of amazing. And it's also nice because the water comes from underneath the plant. It's not coming from above the ground, so no water's evaporating, from like your sprinklers or even drip irrigation, as good as it is only 90% efficient. Oyas are like 100% efficient. And you can use Oyas in a vegetable garden if you want to place them and then have plants within a few feet of them. You could do that. Oyas, though, are really great for containers. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. The pots. Okay. So pots, it's a really great way to water your pots. And so if you do not like to go out, which who does, watering their pots with flowering annuals all the time, the Oya will let you have several days where you don't have to go out there at all. And it's so nice. It's so helpful. Oyas, because they are a clay thing, if you live in an area where the ground freezes, you have to dig them up in the fall. Oh, okay. Yeah, you'll have to dig them up. You just spray them off, spray the dirt off, and you just store them in a safe place like your garage or somewhere. And then you just put them back out again once the ground thaws. You can also make your own, and Oyas come in all different sizes. So I use those that I have bought, and I've also made some, which in the book, I think you saw, I have a project where you can make your own Oya, and it's very inexpensive. And they work just as, in my opinion, mine work just as well as my other ones. And it's basically, you can get all the details in the book, but it's taking 2 terracotta pots and just putting the ends together, and you're gluing the ends together. And it works so well. So it's a really, really helpful tool. Yeah. I was intrigued by that. And here it would be tricky to have to dig it up and put it in. But it'd be a pain. But if it's in a pot, it might not be so bad. The pot would be okay. Because I have wondered, because I'm always annoyed by having to water all my pots. I don't know why. I'd rather be in the vegetable garden. Does the pots on the deck. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's just weird. But so an Oya would be great for that. That would make sense for there. Okay. So you're not freezing. So do you leave yours in the same place permanently? Like they just stay there? Okay. They just stay there. All right. And you plant around them every year? Yes. Okay. We get freezing temperatures. Sure. We could get into the 20s, but the ground never freezes. So we're okay. Okay. That makes sense. All right.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to look into those more because I thought this is so cool. Why have I not seen these before?
They're so awesome. Oh my gosh, you will have so much fun with it. It's just makes life so easy.
Yes, yes. I'm curious if you could speak just for a minute to rainwater harvesting. It's something I have not done. I mean, my greenhouse has a gutter and I collect a little bit in a bucket, but that's pretty much all I've harvested. And when I talk to people who have really awesome rainwater collection systems, and I'm so jealous, but I'm like, well, they're getting many, many inches of rain a year and we're getting not that much. So I'm like, is it even worth it for someone like me to put in that sort of system or to think in that way, because I don't get a ton of rain? Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
So I live in an area that gets an average of 8 inches of rain a year.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if we think about it in this way, a square foot of dirt, like square foot of your yard, a 1 inch of rain will yield 0.62 gallons of water. And so that's not insignificant. Mm-hmm. And if you have torrential rain events, that's great because you can actually collect that water. Because if you get rain that comes down really hard, it usually runs off before it sinks in the ground very well. So you can collect that water and you can use it later. And the easiest way to do it is starting out with a rain barrel. You can use water tanks, and particularly people in dry climates, those are really practical because then we have these long stretches where we don't get rain, but you've got this wonderful storage and you can do that. So rain barrels, and store a certain amount, and your gutters from your roof will channel the water into there. A water tank will hold more. So if you want to do that, I saw this garden. It was just wonderful. And there's a picture of it in the book. And it was in Minneapolis, of all places. And I know I'm mentioning Minneapolis a lot, but again, they had so many great water harvesting strategies. This beautiful home had water that was channeled from the roof, and it went down into drains that were in the ground. You couldn't even see the drains. They were hidden by some nice, pretty rocks. And they had huge cisterns, which are massively big water tanks under the ground. You'd never know they were there. And they could run their sprinklers off of that for their grass and anything else. It was a very advanced water harvesting system. But in a simpler way, rain barrel is a great thing to look into. And the rain barrels have a little, at the top of it, once they fill up, there's a little overflow valve where water will come out the top and it'll run down. When it comes to our homes, most homes are slightly sloped so that when water falls, it heads down to the street. Yep. And then it flows away. Now, the water that flows away down your street is picking up pollutants and all these things from the street. And then, that can get into our water supply or watershed or wherever. So it's not great stuff. What you can do, and this is not that hard to do, is you can do more of a passive water harvesting, which is where you simply contour your landscape. You move the earth around, you move your soil around. So you look at the points where water comes off of your home when it rains. And we can create these shallow channels that actually move water to different parts of the landscape. So it can move it around a tree that helps that tree get a deep drink of water. It can move around to the base of shrubs that would appreciate that deep drink. You can create, I have a project listed in the book about how to create a rain garden. And so we can use the water we have, not letting it flow out to the street right away, and letting it water the plants we have. It's free. And what that rainwater also does is, if it's allowed to rest a little bit in the garden, it sinks into the ground, helps build those deep root systems, but also that water will eventually make its way down to your groundwater supplies. So there's lots of different ways with just thinking of contouring. So if you see some landscapes, they have gentle mounds and things like that. And that could be very beautiful, but that also is channeling the water. And dry creek beds, those are very popular. Where you have the little creek beds running off. Well, those are actually, a lot of people just do it for design, but they were actually supposed to be functional. Sure. And if you have those kind of beautifully curving through the landscape, that slows the flow of water. So it allows it to not run off right away. It allows it to permeate into the soil. And if you have plants located alongside that dry creek bed. It's really beautiful from a design standpoint, but it absolutely can benefit as well.
I think I love that even more. I mean, I'm intrigued by the rain barrels, and I would like to add a few more. Because we get the torrential thunderstorms, the violent thunderstorms.
We do too.
Yeah. And then it's nothing for weeks. And then it's like an inch in an hour. So,
yeah. That's what we get.
Yeah.
We get that here. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, I know I can capture some of that, but I'm more intrigued by how can I design my gardens, my landscape, just like to let that slow down and soak in a little bit more. Yeah.
So it kind of means going out right after it's rained and, or go out in the rain if it's not lightning, see where the water's going. See where it naturally is starting to go. Cause that's kind of an invitation like, okay, this is where it's coming from. How can I take that and gently, move it over here? And it could be just a really beautiful, feature to the landscape. Most people who don't know, wouldn't even know that you're harvesting water.
Sure. Sure.
But what it does is it increases what water can do for you. Because usually it's just going to run into the street and it's not going to benefit you at all. But now you actually get to keep some of it or a lot of it. I love that. I'm going to go out next time we get rain, which won't be for a while, but I'm going to go out and watch to see what happens. So that's awesome. Okay. My wheels are turning now. So thank you for that. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. So this has been very quick hour, but as we kind of get ready to wrap up here, is there any area here we didn't cover? Any last words of wisdom you want to give to someone who's thinking in this water smart direction? Okay. I got two more things really quickly. Okay. Yeah. I love flowers and I love color, but I'm going to recommend you ditch planting your thirsty flowering annuals in pots. Okay. Okay. Instead, I like the sound of this. Keep going. Yeah, use flowering shrubs. Use shrubs that flower in your pots instead. You're still going to get the color. You're going to attract a lot more pollinators, and they can stay in the pot for a long time. You don't have to switch them out every year. They take less fertilizer and they use a lot less water. Now, I'm curious. So for me, when we do, like we freeze, are there shrubs I could get that could stay in the pot in the winter, or would I have to bring them in? You would probably, depends on the shrub. So you probably have to talk to your nursery professional. To my nursery person. Okay. They can tell you that. It could be that you might have to bring some into your, garage or space that keeps them, just a little happy, a little warmer so they don't freeze. But you could talk to them and they can tell you which will work for you. But it's such a beautiful alternative. Now, you can also use succulents as well. Ooh, yeah. Now, you will have to bring those in. Yes. But people are going crazy for succulents, let me tell you. I mean, everywhere I travel, we have them here all the time. But people are going crazy for them everywhere. And they're just this really beautiful plant with beautiful, unique shapes and textures and don't need a whole lot of water at all. So really good choice there. And then I'm going to finish, if I can, a little bit about lawns because, all right, some stats here. Lawns use 3 times more water annually than a pool. And they can use up to 10 times more water than a landscape filled with drought-tolerant plants. Now, I'm not this huge anti-lawn person, I know, but I'm going to encourage you, if you have a non-functional lawn, meaning you have a lawn space and it's just decorative, consider removing it. Okay. And putting something in like beautiful, maybe evergreen ground covers instead. They use a fraction of the water. You're not out there mowing. You're not out there having to fertilize and worry about the weeds. Now, if you do have a lawn, and maybe you want to get rid of it, but your partner doesn't, or some places, the homeowners association requires you to have one. Yeah. Or some places, like in the Midwest and all, well, lawns cover everything. And so, they're not being pulled out. So what we could do is there's some things we can do to make them use less water. And the one thing is allow your lawn to grow taller. Yes. Allow the grass to grow taller. If it's a warm season grass, allow it to get 2 inches tall. If it's a cool season grass, let it get 3 inches tall before you mow it. And when you mow it, only remove 1/3 of the height each time because that's shading the roots. It's keeping the soil from drying out really fast. Also, I'm going to save you time and a pain here is when you're mowing your grass, don't capture your grass clippings. Oh, sure. Let them fall on the grass. They break down very quickly. And as they break down, they're going to release nutrients back into the soil.
Okay.
And they also help make the soil more permeable to water so that the water can sink down.
That's great advice. Okay. I like that. Yes, we have a small lawn. Well, we're prairie, so grasslands are kind of that's kind of natural here. But we do have a lawn because we when the kids were smaller, they wanted to roll around in the grass. And
that's what's a functional lawn.
It's a functional lawn. But every year I'm like, I have this urge to rip it all out. Someday it will happen. My biggest fear is that I'll put in some really high maintenance landscaping and it'll take so much work to make it not look cruddy, I'll have to spend so much time making it look better than what a lawn would have looked. But anyway, I think that will happen at some point because I think about it constantly. I like that direction for sure. Yeah.
But the one thing I'll just mention one more thing about the lawns that people always make mistakes with is they turn their sprinklers on in the middle of the day.
Yes.
And half of that water evaporates instantly.
Yep.
So water early in the morning.
Yep, that's great advice. And sometimes if you can do your timer, is that probably good for your vegetable gardens too? If you can set your timer in the nighttime.
Any kind of water early in the morning.
Yeah.
Some places that have a little more humidity than you and I have, we don't want to water in the evening because that can allow more fungal diseases to form.
Yeah. Okay.
So early morning is the best. But like early, it could be like 4:30 in the morning or 5 in the morning.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Okay. Great advice. Oh my goodness. So much good stuff, Noelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you have a ton of information. You have some wonderful books. If someone wants to dive into everything you have to offer, where's the best place for them to start? So the repository for everything is my website, azplantlady.com, and there's links for my books there. Find me on social media there as well. There's lots of good garden content and online classes that I teach and speaking schedule. Everything's there. Good. But you can find me, on Facebook and Instagram as well. Okay. Fabulous. So guys, definitely go follow Noelle. Like I said, her books are super practical. These are not fluffy books. They have tons of projects. They have tons of practical, you will know exactly what to do once you dive in. So go grab copies of those as well. Remind me the names. We have the Water Smart Garden and then
dry climate gardening.
Or dry climate gardening.
Now, dry climate gardening is for the Southwest and California.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then Water Smart gardening would be for
everywhere.
Everybody else. Okay. Awesome.
It is for everywhere.
Everybody. There it is.
There
awesome.
We go.
That's beautiful too. Yeah. Lots of pictures in there. So yeah. Fun. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. Or thank you so much, Noelle. Thank you guys for listening. And we will catch up on the next episode of Old Fashioned on Purpose.